Hello, my name is Lilian Okibe. Welcome to my channel. Many of us are going to have to go through the issue of having flat locks at one point or the other on our lock journey. So if you are going through that issue right now, just know that you are not alone. Having flat locks is completely normal, and to a large extent it is kind of inevitable. However, there are ways to adequately prevent flat locks or even correct them if you already have them. So in this video I'm going to be sharing all of that with you. So if you'd like to know how to prevent flat locks or how to correct flat locks if you already have them, then definitely keep on watching. There's this misconception in the lock community that flat locks are ugly. That is not true. Flat locks are beautiful. I've seen so many people with beautiful flat locks, right? But I know that many people prefer the cylindrical shape of locks, and that's why I'm making this video, because earlier on my lock journey I had that issue of my locks flattening out, and I was able to get to the bottom of it and solve the problem. So I just want to share all that information with you guys. So the first thing we are going to be talking about today is basically the causes of flat locks, and then we'll move on to talk about the prevention, things you can do to prevent it, and then to conclude the video I'll be sharing with you guys what you can do to correct flat locks if you already have them. So the causes of flat locks are basically anything that just has the potential of flattening your lock. So let's just imagine that this is a lock. So anything whatsoever that will put any form of pressure in such a way that it flattens the lock, that's actually what can cause flat locks. Some examples of these are lying down on one direction of your head every single time. It can actually cause flat locks. So you could be lying down this way or lying down this way, because you're only putting the pressure on one direction or two opposite directions, so it has the potential of causing flat locks. If you have anything that is putting pressure on your locks in all four directions, from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, most likely you're not going to have flat locks. You're going to have your locks becoming more skinny, but it's still going to be cylindrical. But if anything that is putting pressure that is just one directional or two opposite directions, then that can cause flat locks. Another example of what can cause flat locks is wearing tight hats, tight scarves, tight do-rags on your head consistently. Those can also cause flat locks. Another thing is wearing tight buns and tight ponytails where you're just pulling your hair in a particular direction can cause flat locks. Another predisposing factor that can cause flat locks is the shape of your pattern. So people who have triangular parts, like the parts of their locks rather, people who have triangular parts or rectangular parts have a higher chance of developing flat locks along the line than people who have like circular parts or square parts or anything like that, or even diamond parts basically. So all these things I just mentioned have the potential of causing flat locks, but they actually become even more severe when when you do those things on wet or damp hair. So if you are putting on a scarf or a hat on wet or damp hair, your chances of getting flat locks will be much higher than someone who wears them on dry hair. Or if you are sleeping on one direction, sleeping with wet or dry hair, of course that person is going to have a higher chance of developing flat locks than someone who does the same thing, sleep on one direction on dry hair. So now we're moving on to the things that you can do to prevent flat locks. The first thing, I feel like this is the most important, and I feel like this is what many people do that ends up resulting in them having flat locks. Do not sleep on wet or dry hair. Don't do it. Don't do it. That is the #1 recipe to having flat locks. The thing is that when the hair is wet, whether you have locks or you have loose natural hair, when wet or damp hair is generally more manageable, and because it's more manageable, it is more obedient to anything you do to it. So and that's why many people, when they want to put in coils on their hair, they do it on wet hair, wait for it to dry, and then it retains the coils, because whatever you do to your hair when it is wet, there's a high chance that your hair will remain that way even long after it dries, right? So sleeping on wet hair is a terrible idea. Do not sleep on wet hair, because when you sleep on wet hair, you've made your locks soft and easier to manage. So when you lie down, you are putting pressure, flattening pressure on your locks, right? And so most likely when you wake up, your locks are going to be flat. And if you do that consistently, it's just a matter of time before your locks become flat. Another thing is, another predisposing factor that I forgot to mention earlier is the fact that people with bigger locks have a higher chance of developing flat locks than people with smaller locks, because with bigger locks the surface area is a lot wider. So most likely all the hair in that lock, most times when you lie down, for example, let's say if the lock is big, there is wider space for it to go through flattening, right? Because all the hair is just together in one big chunk. So whatever you do to one side of the head is probably going to affect all the other parts of the hair, because everything is bound together. So everything is just together and connected. Unlike people with smaller locks, even when you sleep on the lock, because they are not like really connected, you can have one lock that is like receiving most of the pressure, and you may have other locks that are like bent or whatever, and so the effect of flattening may not be as bad or as much. It is easy to say don't sleep on wet hair, right? But sometimes it is not actually feasible. Like, just imagine you went out, somehow it rained outside, and then you got wet from the rain, and then you get back home, you're tired, you've had a long day, you want to go to sleep, but your locks are still wet. Doesn't mean that you should just sit and wait till your locks dry. That's not actually realistic. So for some rare cases where there's nothing you can do, you have to sleep with wet locks, I recommend that you try to like scrunch your locks in a way. Just basically try to do some wrapping. If your locks are really short, you can do the method of putting your locks in puffs, especially in areas where you lie down. So if you're someone that you like to lie down like this way on this side of the head, then you want to put all the locks in this side in like probably a puff, right? Or if your locks are really long, you can just do a form of wrap, or even if it's like a bantu knot or like a bun, right? Just so that when you lie down, the tension on your locks is like, because your locks are like probably in a puff and it's like this, so the tension of you lying down will be exerting a pressure in this direction on your lock. So this is not going to flatten the lock, this will only like encourage shrinkage, right? Instead of you just sleeping like that and then sleeping this way, and then goes ahead to flatten the lock. So I hope you guys understand. So if you have to sleep on wet hair, just on around the areas, like for me now, when I sleep, I sleep like this. Sometimes I turn to the other side, sometimes I sleep facing the ceiling, right? So when I have to, like, there's nothing I can do, I have to sleep on wet hair, I go ahead and put one puff here, one puff at the back, and one puff here, just to just make it easier, so that my locks don't, when I wake up, my locks are not as flat. So that's something you can look into if you have to sleep on wet hair. Another thing I feel like I want to talk about here when it comes to sleeping on wet hair is, I know that so many people like to moisturize their hair at night. That's not really a good idea, especially if after you moisturize your hair you go straight to bed, because you have moisturized your hair is most likely going to be wet or damp, and so you're going to be sleeping on wet hair, and that is not ideal. Instead of moisturizing your hair at night, you may want to shift your moisturizing routine to maybe at noon or in the afternoon, or like in the morning. Or you want to make sure that even if you do it at night, you want to make sure that you use just a little water, so that before you go to sleep, you do it earlier at night, so that before you go to sleep your hair will be dry. And it's not also a good idea to just moisturize your hair and put on your bonnet at night, because the bonnet will keep the moisture in, and so your hair is going to be wet or damp, and so when you go to sleep like that, you're most likely making your hair more prone to becoming flat over time. Then another thing I feel like you can do to prevent flat locks is to take advantage of water. Now I know I just said here that you should not sleep on wet hair, that is true, but water actually helps to prevent flattening of locks, because when you wet your hair frequently, water actually helps your hair and the strands of your hair to coil up and spiral. And that coil up and spiral, the thing is, what many people don't understand is that flattening of locks is not really a natural process. Like, it's not like a natural process in the sense that your hair was not created to be flat per se. It may not be perfect cylinder, but your hair naturally, all things being equal, will not just form flat in most cases, right? What causes most people to have flat locks is how they maintain their locks, probably how they sleep, or things like that I have mentioned earlier. Most times that's actually what causes flattening of locks. So water kind of like helps to reset your hair, it helps to reset your locks. So let's say you somehow you forgot about all what I've said earlier, and you slept on wet hair, and then you did not do all the precautions I said earlier, and then you wake up with flat hair and flat locks. By just spraying some water into your hair and like scrunching your hair, your locks are most likely going to plump up a little bit. So I highly recommend that. Don't sleep on wet hair, obviously, but also use water to your advantage. So if peradventure you notice that your locks are getting flat or flatter, it's also a good idea to increase how often you wet your hair, just to help your locks to plump up a little bit. And this greatly helps your locks. This greatly helps to prevent flattening of locks. Like, you'd be surprised. But just make sure that before you lie down, before you go to sleep or anything, just make sure that your locks are fully dry. Another thing that I previously mentioned earlier that you can do to prevent flattening of locks, is to know what you want from the beginning of your journey and just do your things accordingly. Parting system, like the shape of your part, can greatly affect whether your hair is going to be more prone to flattening over time or not. Like I said earlier, if you have rectangular parts or triangular parts, you have a higher chance of developing flat locks than someone who has circular or, you know, box parts. So early on your journey, if you're someone that you feel like you're not going to like flat locks, then I highly recommend that while you're getting your locks started, use another parting system. Don't use triangular parts or rectangular parts. Then another thing that you can do to prevent flattening of locks is to crunch up your locks. Even when you're sleeping on dry hair, like if your locks are not wet, when you're going to bed, crunch up your locks while you sleep, especially around areas where you lie on. So for example, someone who lays down like this, when you want to go to sleep, you want to kind of like, as you lie down on your bed, you want to kind of like not just lie down like this, just kind of like do something like this and lie down on it. That way, even though you are putting pressure on your hair, the pressure is not flattening, but rather it's crunching. So when you wake up, your locks are going to be more it's going to be like shorter, in the sense that it helps with the shrinkage rather than being flat. So that is something I highly recommend, and that's something I do that helps me a lot. So in areas where you lie down, if you're someone that you lie down facing the ceiling, then you want to do that at the back. Just kind of like, before you lie down, just kind of scrunch it a little bit before you lie down, so that, you know, it's not like that. I'm assuming that if you sleep on a bonnet if you sleep on a pillowcase rather than a bonnet. Personally, I don't really like using a scarf, because you sleeping on a scarf, especially at the early stages of your locking process, and especially if you start your locks with things like palm rolls, or the method I use, which is the Lilian Okibe temporary locks method, then you have a higher chance of developing flat locks, because your starter locks are soft and fluffy and easy to shape, right? So unlike someone who started with 2-strand twists, because the twists are like really tight, someone like that will not have issues with flattening of locks until when their hair grows out and their new growth, you know, starts to show, and then that's when they may start having issues with flat locks. But for people who start their locks with like coils and things like that, they may have a higher chance of flattening, because you have more frizz, your locks are more fluffy, your locks are softer, and so your locks may become flat. Your locks may be more prone to being flat. Just doing something bad one day is not going to be the end of the world, but when you do all these bad hair practices consistently, those things will eventually make your locks flatten out over time. Another thing I feel like you can do to prevent flattening of locks is to try as much as you can to prevent combining your locks. Now, it's not like a general rule that if you combine your locks, then your locks are going to be flat. But the thing is, when you combine locks, there's a high chance of you messing up your parting system. So let's say you started with box parts, for example. If you go ahead to combine 2 locks together, there's a high chance that those 2 boxes may end up becoming a rectangle or like a triangle, and so that particular lock may be more prone to being flat. I have a lock like that down here. I combined 2 locks that I felt that were really skinny. So this lock generally has the potential to be flat. So it's just like really weird and it's mostly flat around the root. So that's an example. I also have some other locks around here that I combined that is just has the potential to be flat, and I always have to really go in to make sure that they are not like flattening out. Now let's move on to what you can do to correct your locks if you notice that they are already flat. Now I just want to first say that the earlier you notice that your locks are getting flat, and the earlier you start taking measures to correct it, the better. So when your locks are still newly flat, it is much easier to correct than when you wait along the line till when your locks are fully mature in the flatness for you to correct. Most times when it gets to that point, it may be almost impossible for you to correct that. The only thing you can do is to correct the new growth that is coming out. So try as much as you can to inspect. It's always a good idea to inspect your locks from time to time, just to see what is happening, you know, in there, right? So that if there's anything that is happening that you're not really pleased with, you can take measures to correct as soon as possible, especially when we're talking about flat locks. So now the first thing you can do to correct flattening of your locks, if your locks are already flat, number one thing I highly recommend is water your locks frequently. Just like spraying water into your hair frequently, or like wetting your hair frequently, can help to prevent flat locks. It can also help to correct flat locks when it happens. But do not wet your hair and then go and lie down or rest your head, or like basically go to bed or anything like that. As you wet your hair, just allow it to dry like that. Don't like put it up in a bun. Don't like go ahead to wear a hat, you know, because that would just be counterproductive. So as much as wetting your hair frequently can prevent flat locks and also correct flat locks, you don't want to do it at a time when your hair is going to be put under any form of tension, because that will just make it worse. What you should do in addition to wetting your locks frequently, if you're trying to correct flat locks, is after you wet it, just go ahead and try to, like when you have flat locks, is like you're going to have a pointed part. So let's say this is a lock, right? If it goes through the flattening process, it's going to be flat in such a way that these two sides will be pointed. So what you want to do is, since it was flattened this way, you want to go ahead, after wetting your hair, you want to go ahead and just gently pinch at the sharp part of the lock that is sharp because it has been flattened. I don't know, I hope you guys can see. So this is the part that is sharp, so you just want to go ahead and just pinch it just to undo the flattening. Palm rolling actually helps to correct flattening of locks, but the downside to palm rolling is that it can in turn make your locks skinny. So if you don't mind your locks getting a little bit more skinny, then you can definitely palm roll. That is actually much faster. But if you don't want your locks to get smaller or more skinny, then what you want to do is not necessarily palm roll, but just take the lock and just pinch at the pointed part of the flattening, right? You just want to pinch it, and you want to do that consistently. I want to say that flat locks do not happen overnight, like I mentioned earlier. So corrective measures will not also work overnight. So you want to be consistent as you're doing that. Do that consistently from time to time. Make sure you wet your locks, then go ahead to pinch, you know, that flat part, and over time you'll see that your locks will become cylindrical again. Another thing that you can do to correct flat locks, and this particularly refers to people who have flat locks because of their parting system. So people who have like triangular parts or like rectangular parts, what you want to do is focus on, if you're still in the early stages of your locking process, you want to focus on the root of your locks. You're going to find that you're going to have loose hairs around the root, and then just above your loose hairs you're going to have like the newest part of your hair that is locked. So you want to focus on that part. If you are constantly trying to force the new growth not to be flat, it may actually be painful because you are going to be doing it all the time, and it may end up making your lock skinny. So you want to focus on the part of the lock that is just above the new growth, and you want to do what I just said. Pinch from time to time. Pinch. You can just go ahead and just turn a little, not like a full retwisting session, but just turn a little and pinch. Anytime you get the opportunity, just try to kind of like pinch it so that it doesn't form flat. That part is out of your scalp, so you actually have the freedom to mold it into shape, because it's still relatively a baby lock. It's still like it's a newborn when it comes to the locking process. It's easier for you to mold that part of your lock. So you just want to go ahead and, you know, pinch and basically train it not to be flat. And you're going to see that as your locks grow out, your locks, even though you have you know, weird pattern system, even though you have triangular pattern system or rectangular pattern system, you're going to see that your locks may seem flat at the roots at your new growth, but the strands of your locks are going to be cylindrical. So with that, we've come to the end of this video. I hope you guys found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if this is your first time on my channel and you'd like to see more videos from me, I make so many hair tip videos, both about locks and about loose natural hair. So if you want to see more videos from me, then definitely subscribe and click on the notification bell so that every time I upload a new video, you get a notification. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys in my next video.